Hello, everybody. Hello, Alamo. Hola a todos. Hola, Pasuel. Welcome to the stream, everybody. Another Professional Genealogist Reacts live stream. And we're just going to be chatting today, answering questions, all that fun stuff. And I wasn't even thinking about the whole 23andMe until I took a look at the comments and I was like, oh, yeah, that's going on, isn't it? So I hope you're all having a wonderful day so far. We'll do our typical of kind of going through the hellos, and then I'll talk about, I guess, a little bit about the plan for today's stream, which really isn't much. It's just, answering questions. But I guess if 23andMe's coming up a lot, it might be. But I'm also trying another thing. I tried it on a previous stream, but I'm doing like a goal. So, I mean, I guess I'll mention it here, but I'll mention it again in a bit. So if you do super stickers, I do guarantee that I will answer questions attached to those. But on top of that, if we get, I think it's at least, 5 super stickers at the equivalent of, I think, $5 American, then I'll do a special sneak peek discussion about research in some upcoming YouTuber Family Tree episodes. But let's go through our hellos and then we'll, talk a bit more about everything. So, hello, Anna Tommaso from Rochester, New York. It's good to see you, Anna. Glad you're here. We've got Brian Nash from How We Got Here Genealogy. Good day, eh? Yes, good day. James Burton, hi from London, UK. Hello, James. Good to have you. Julia Joyce, hello, everybody. Hello, Julia. Good to have you as well. And then this was the comment that was like, oh, yeah. Thanks, Nathan. I have a feeling this whole stream will be about 23andMe. I don't know if it will be or not. We'll have to see. And I'm starting to notice that I might need to either... Let's make that brighter, and then let's see, which way should I go? No, this way. Let's see how that goes. Not quite as glitchy. I don't know. I have a green screen. I'd figure it'd be like cleaner than that, but I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. All right. Karma Gal, hi from Nebraska, on time. Yes, you are on time. Good to have you, Karma Gal. Then we've got Tasha Carl. Hello from Minnesota. Hello, Tasha. Thank you for joining. And Rob, goedenavond vanuit het Verenigd Koninkrijk. Good evening from the UK. Is that how you say the UK in Dutch? Verenigd Koninkrijk. I don't know. Tell me how good I was with pronouncing that too. Karma, probably I'd need to pull my dad's information out and delete the account. Oh, are you deleting your info off of 23andMe, I guess is what you're saying. Jordan Scrism, heyo from Chicago. Well, heyo, Jordan. Guessing if you're in Chicago, you're also in the 630. Keep going with that O. What kind of dog? Okay. Yeah, James, I don't think I'll delete my data at 23andMe. If it's bought by another company, I'd want it to transfer over. Yeah, I mean, I'm not planning to delete my DNA there anytime soon. And when people ask me, should they still test on 23andMe? I personally think that if you are looking for family or looking for DNA matches, you need to be in as many databases as possible. And so it's still worthwhile to be in 23andMe. But I guess maybe we'll get into that a little bit more as we go on. Stig, hello, everybody from Oslo. Hello, Stig. Good to have you. Julia, I'm not deleting my account. My DNA is on numerous DNA sites anyway. Yeah. Anna, I did delete my 23andMe, but only because I have had my data stolen before. I am on 4 other DNA companies' websites, so I don't feel too bad about losing the DNA connections. Yeah, so I mean, that's the thing too, is everybody needs to gauge their risk factors for themselves. And some people like myself may feel comfortable keeping their DNA on there. Others may just feel, no, it's not worth the risk for me. And if it's not worth the risk, then, do what you want to do. Karma Gal, an ad interrupts that. Oh, I guess maybe me. Charlie, evening. Well, evening, Charlie. Good to have you as always. Our wonderful mod admin. I need to actually figure out what you technically are. I know, but either way, it's good to have you. Hello, 937379392. My heritage update for ethnicity update was inaccurate. Yeah, it seemed like the update that my heritage had was focused largely on a Northwestern European ancestry. That's where they kind of tried to get that more nuanced. And so I feel like a lot of people outside of that didn't quite get as good of an update, but yeah. Illyrian, buenas noches, señor. Buenas noches, ¿cómo está? Yo soy bueno. Yo no sé, güey. Yo no sé. Niet Brokema, goedenavond van Groningen. Alles goed there? Ja, alles goed hier. Ik hoop dat alles goed met jou. Karma Gal, rewound that so that I could hear what I missed. Stupid ads. Oh, yeah, and I don't know if that new YouTube update with mid-rolls is affecting lives as well. I think it's just regular videos. Like, for those who don't know, YouTube did a ad rollout, or they're going, or maybe it's going to come out in a bit. I don't know. Yeah. So I don't know if it's going to hit this or if it has or not, but yeah, just expect it. Stig, the CEO of 23andMe resigned because otherwise she wouldn't be able to bid on the bankrupt company, so it'll likely be resurrected. Yeah, I know that's something that I've been hearing from a lot of people, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And, I think it's Ann Wojcicki. I can't remember because they're sisters. And is it Susan Wojcicki and Ann Wojcicki? And I think Susan was the one that was CEO of YouTube for a while. But yeah, so interestingly enough, there's been a lot of connections between the corporate entity at YouTube and the corporate entity at 23andMe. Catherine Michael, good evening all. Another one in the UK. Good evening, cousin. Good to have you. And Nick Brokema, just got my first DNA results from 23andMe, and 2 days later they went chapter 11. Yeah, well, at least it's chapter 11. If they went chapter 7, then we'd all be talking a whole different thing. And yes, Charlie, you are you. Doesn't matter if you're a mod or an admin, you're you. Vicky B, evening from Manchester, UK. Evening, Vicky. Good to have you. Yo estoy bien. Yeah. Funny thing is, Spanish was my first language, but that was only like until I was like 2.5, maybe, or 3. Like, I don't even know how old, like, my first words were Spanish and all of that, but then that was because I had a nanny who was from Guatemala. And then right after her, we had a nanny who was from the UK. And so I lost my Spanish. And like, when I speak Spanish in some places, like I'll have a decent accent sometimes, and I'll confuse people because it'll be like, oh, yo hablo un poquito español. Oh, and they like go crazy, like talking full. And I'm just like, yo no sé. Yo no sé. Un poquito. But yeah. All right. How many languages can you speak? Well, in terms of fluently, really English only. But if in terms of if I had to go to a country that only spoke a language not English, I'd be able to get by if they spoke Spanish. Granted, it'd need to be kind of more of a Mexican, Central American type of Spanish. If it's like South American Spanish, it's probably going to be very difficult. If it's Castilian Spanish, like the Spanish from Europe, like Spain, I think I'd probably be able to get by, but it'd probably be a little bit difficult to get at first because there are some differences. But I learned Guatemalan Spanish, and then the Spanish I've learned since then has all largely been like a Mexican style way of speaking. Especially when I worked in kitchens, working with a lot of guys from Mexico and basically learning, that's where I can speak the best Spanish, is talking about food and stuff, but I don't get to flex that muscle much. And then I've been learning Dutch. Now in terms of knowing little bits of languages, I know a little bit of a lot of languages. I know, I can speak just a little bit of French. When I say a little bit, I mean, I know a dozen phrases or so, or if I heard someone speaking something very basic in that language, I might be able to get it. But a lot of that also has to do with similarities of different languages. And then I can phonetically read Hebrew and I can phonetically read Cyrillic and kind of get by with Greek just because of my time in Greek life in college. So it's like I know a little bit of a lot of stuff, but I wouldn't be considered even like elementary school fluent for any language outside of English. But I'm hoping I can get Dutch there. All right. Carmen Gal, my dad's DNA is on Ancestry, MyHeritage, and FTDNA, so it'd have to weigh the pros and cons of keeping 23andMe. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is it's hard to figure out if you should take it off if you are worried about the risks, but you do want to like do the, actually find family, because if someone that you're looking for some DNA match that's really useful to your research is only on 23andMe, and for whatever reason, you're not going to be able to get that person to get in any of the other databases, then if you leave the 23andMe database, then you're going to lose the ability to compare that person to other matches and, all of that stuff. So that's definitely one of the, pros of keeping it is that, there are going to be matches on 23andMe that, or even in the future, if, assuming 23andMe continues, that, other people will get into the database that might be that match for you. So personally for me, I mean, I don't see the cons being that much of a risk, at least in, present day, like basically another company being able to get my raw DNA sequence, basically the CSV file or text file that you download if you download it from one of these companies. I don't see that being that big of an issue. In fact, there's a lot of people who put their entire, readings up on what's that site Snippedia. And funny enough, there was an article from Reason that came out a few days ago where the guy was basically talking a lot about why he was not only going to keep his DNA on 23andMe, but would suggest it to others. And then like basically at the end of the article, he's like, I put my entire DNA sequence on Snippedia and anyone can go and look at it. And, that's how comfortable I am. And like, there really isn't, basically, the files that you have, it's just every SNP. So every specific spot on your genome that they're testing. So it's called a SNP, but it's really a single nucleotide polymorphism. So it's a single spot, like a single base pair, but that specific base pair is considered a SNP because there's variations that they've been able to find. So that's one of the reasons why when you hear about DNA testing, they're only testing a small portion of your DNA. Basically, they're testing about 700,000 SNPs when you have like 3 billion base pairs. So that's only a small percentage, of 3 billion. So it's like, it's just a small portion of your DNA, unless you're doing a whole genome sequence DNA, but 23andMe is not. So it's only a small portion of your DNA, it's specific SNPs, but those variations are tied to things like traits or medical, or what we focus on, the ancestral aspect of things. And so, that's what your file is it's every single SNP at every specific spot and what the base pair reading is. And so at this point today, there's really nothing nefarious that people could do with it other than compare it to things to see if you have SNPs that correlate to risks of diseases or specific traits or ancestry or things like that. But even then, it doesn't tell you 100%. It basically is just kind of telling you, if you have variants that are related to genes that have that, because a gene will be made up of lots and lots of parts of your DNA. It's not like a specific spot. It's like, technically it's a specific spot, but it's like a lot of specific spots. And then even then there's multiple genes that can go into these different things. And so you're looking at thousands upon thousands of spots for a specific thing. Like I think for the breast cancer gene, BRCA1 or whatever it is, I think it's like 1,000 different variants that they have tied to that at least. So yeah, so I don't even remember what I was saying. I've just been kind of like blabbing. I don't know. I say this a lot in reactions where I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm blabbing, and then I'll get people in the comments like, no, that's the best part. So Hopefully y'all enjoy this. Julia, I know it's morbid, but my elderly uncle gave me permission to take a DNA sample before he passes away. And that's something that a lot of people do. In fact, there's people that have gotten samples after someone's passed, and they were given permission that if I pass, you can do my DNA sort of thing. And some of the companies do allow that. Like I know I had a friend who basically contacted one of these companies because he had a parent who passed away, and asked them, would I be able to get a sample? And basically they said, yes, you can. Just understand that, because of the way that it has to be done for, someone who's already deceased, that it has to be done in a way that you can't use like the vials they use or whatever or something. So like basically, there's a risk that the way that the samples are taken might not be sequenced. So I don't remember exactly what happened to it, but yeah, it's not uncommon. Not uncommon. I bought a friend a DNA test as a birthday gift, and he found out his biological mother isn't his actually mom. Yeah, that's one that happens for people all the time. I mean, I guess not all the time, but it's like, not uncommon to find that out. Usually it's the father, though. When it's the mother, that's a bit more surprising, I think. But I'm guessing, was it like an adoption thing, or is it just the biological mother and he does have the actual biological father that he thought he had? So, but I don't know, maybe it's a more complicated thing. Charlie, but what if they clone us? This is one of the things with a lot of what's going on with 23andMe is that a lot of people are saying so. Like, I know Charlie's saying this, or at least I hope, I'm assuming that Charlie's saying this very sarcastically. But basically, people are saying all these like basically sci-fi sorts of worries of things like, they clone us or they, genetically engineer us and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, there are things going on in the world where they're doing cloning and genetic engineering and stuff, but it's not involving the type of DNA that we're dealing with in terms of these files and stuff. And even then, the technology isn't there to do like this crazy stuff. And a lot of times when I say that, like to people, I'll hear them sometimes reply, well, what if that comes to be like, that you don't know the future? And it's like, well, yeah, we don't know the future, but at the same time, if you just go by every fear that everybody has, like you'd be out in a shed in the woods, basically. Like, one thing I always think about is kind of like how when microwaves came out and people like you can go and see there were all these people that were claiming, don't use microwaves, they cause radiation, they give you cancer, and they do all this stuff. And it's like, no, that wasn't correct. And it's, could people see it as a possibility? Yeah, it makes sense. But then when they actually looked into it and did all the scientific stuff with it, they realized, oh no, that's not a thing. So it's like, yeah, we don't know what the future holds, but yeah. Okay, I'm rambling again. Brian, yeah, I can read 7 languages fluently. 3 of those I can speak passable plus English. I guess I can speak, read, and write fluently. I didn't count with others. I feel like with a lot of people who do in-depth genealogy, especially if you get into ancestries that speak different languages and getting into those records, you kind of innately pick up things just because you have to learning those records. Like for me, I never thought about learning Dutch ever until I started getting into my family history really seriously. And like I'd always looked at them as like Sephardic Jews and Ashkenazi Jews, because I have both in the Netherlands, but like I'd never thought about the fact that they lived there. And then it was because I was in college. So, in college, you're kind of doing the partying thing. And so, as a college kid, it was like, oh, Amsterdam would be such a cool place to go. And I remember like the first time I pulled up the 1900 census to look at it, and I'm looking at my family living in Boston, and it shows that, my ancestors were born in Amsterdam. And it was like, what? And like, it just had never occurred to me. And so that was the first time it was like, oh, this is cool. So that was the first time I ever really thought about getting into speaking Dutch. And then getting into those records and stuff, I started to learn it. And like one of the first things I did trying to like do genealogy stuff online was I had a blog called sephardicgenealogy.blogspot.com. You can still go and check it out. I actually tried to do a thing where I was going to tie a series I was doing to blogs I was doing, and I think I just decided not to do it. But one of the first ones I did was talking about going through a specific set of records in Amsterdam for the Sephardic Jewish community. And I included in there like basic, Dutch words you should know going through these records. And it's kind of, it's that basic sort of idea of that, of like you're speaking English, but then all of a sudden you find out you have French ancestry and you start going through all these French records. Well, you're going to start picking up on some of that stuff. So, when I got into this was 2009. So, 16 years later, it's kind of a long time for me to actually start trying to learn how to speak it. But going to Amsterdam a couple years ago, that's definitely was a huge inspiration doing that. All right. So at this point, I should mention, because we have a bunch of people in here, and I guess we've already been going for 25 minutes or so. So I mentioned before, for anyone who has questions, I think I have it up here. If I'm going to try to answer questions through chat, but as chat picks up, it's hard to answer everything. So if you do a super sticker, that not only helps me out because it helps support the channel, but I will guarantee that I answer that question on stream. Whereas if you post it in the chat, I may not get to it because I may be skipping ahead and different stuff. The other thing is that I am doing a thing where if we get 5 super chats that are at least $5 American, I think it is. It's like this new thing that YouTube's got going, or at least I just noticed it recently. But if we do at least 5 of those, then I'm going to do a sneak preview discussion, I guess, about some of the upcoming YouTuber Family Tree episodes. So yeah, figured I'd mention that real quick now that we have a bunch more people here. But I guess we'll jump back into chat. Eric, hello from Kansas City, Missouri. Hello, Eric. Good to have you. And then we have Alexandra. Hello, everyone. Coming in from Germany, I believe, if it's the Alexandra who I think it is. Amiable 160. What is the next big discovery in DNA that will affect our community? Well, I guess it's not necessarily. I mean, the next big discovery, I think that's going to be really hard to determine. But the way I would really reword that is the most recent big discovery in DNA that will affect our community. And it's something that I actually talk about in my talk, The Future of Genealogy. It's the thing I finished with, and that's low SNP DNA tests. So a low SNP DNA test would be a DNA test where they're testing a smaller amount of SNPs, those single nucleotide polymorphisms, or those specific spots on your genome. So most tests like Ancestry, 23andMe, MyHeritage, Family Tree DNA, Living DNA, they're testing about 700,000 of these SNPs. So that's 700,000 different spots on the genome. But when you're doing that kind of testing, you need a lot of DNA and it needs to be high quality. So that's one of the reasons why when you do a DNA test, you're spitting in a tube and filling up a ton of it, or you're doing like 2 buccal swabs, however you say it, on each side of the mouth. And so that's a lot of DNA. But one of the things that people really want to do in the genealogy community is artifact testing. And that's testing DNA on artifacts that we believe have DNA from our ancestors. So the number one thing people will talk about when it comes to artifact testing is going to be envelopes with stamps on it, because someone licks a stamp, they put it down, and then that seals in the DNA, and it allows the DNA to stay uncontaminated and just high quality. And so people have been able to get DNA profiles out of those. So like if you have a letter that your great grandma wrote with the envelope with the stamp, and you're pretty sure she's the one that licked the stamp and put it on there, well, then you could possibly get that DNA profile. And the things you could discover by having the oldest generation's test is huge. And I know that personally because I was able to get one of my grandmothers to test. And without her testing, there was a lot of things that we would have never been able to figure out, because the DNA that my mom and my uncle had, it just wasn't enough. We needed my grandmother's. So if I was able to have my grandmother's mother's DNA, oh my God, the discoveries I might be able to find, just because she has specific DNA from a specific line. But the thing with artifact testing is the DNA is usually a very small amount, and it's usually very degraded. So you're dealing with a lot of issues. And when you try to use that degraded DNA and that small amount of DNA for a 700,000 SNP profile, it happens a lot where the profile is just not viable. Like you might not have enough DNA. The DNA may be too degraded. The other problem is sometimes you might have contamination. So like a lot of artifacts people try to send in is like dentures, glasses, hearing aids, all sorts of things. But it can get contaminated by DNA from bacteria. It can get contaminated by DNA from you handling it. All the things that you think about. Basically, think of artifact testing as like you doing testing like how criminal forensic testing is done at crime scenes, where they're, handling it with gloves and putting it in these bags and sealing it and all that kind of stuff. Well, if you're handling it without gloves and doing all this stuff, and like you could get DNA all over it. And then you end up paying a ton of money just to have your own DNA sequenced. And that's another issue with artifact testing too, is you don't truly know most of the time who that DNA is from. So one of the jokes that Blaine Bettinger, a really well-known genetic genealogist, always says is that we'll end up with a database full of mailmen, because so many mailmen were licking stamps and sealing envelopes and stuff that, might get tested. So the thing is that artifact testing has started to come out. It's been out for years. The biggest company, or the company that's been around the longest, is To the Letter DNA. A more recent company, which is now called Genetic Legacies, it used to be called Keepsake DNA. They do artifact testing, and they're actually, I got to speak to Daniel Hellwig, the guy who runs that company. And funny enough, he actually worked at the company I used to work at for a while, DNA Labs International, but right after I had left. But he's since left that company as well, and now he does his own thing. I'm trying to remember what it is. It's something forensics. I can't remember, but the consumer artifact testing company he has is called Genetic Legacies. And when I spoke to him at Roots Tech, he said that they have an over 80%. Why can't I think of the word? Basically, I like literally just had a brain fart of like what the word, basically, success, over 80% success rate. There we go. Okay. Ooh, sometimes. So that was really amazing to hear, because that's one of the biggest difficulties. But the thing is that this new low SNP DNA testing, the one that's basically out now is called Genealogists. It's only available in the forensic world. Now, I have had a ton of experience with Genealogists. I was the first genealogist to solve a case using Genealogists data. I was the genealogist with the most solves for a while. One of the most significant solves I had with that was the Debbie Lynn Randall case, which is a 1972 case where a young girl, Debbie Lynn Randall, was abducted and murdered. And, basically that went unsolved for a long, long time. They had DNA that was connected to the crime scene. That was very likely the suspect. And they tried to sequence it with a typical SNP microarray. So that's basically your Ancestry DNA type of test. And they couldn't get a profile. They tried to then run it on what's known as whole genome sequencing, which tests your entire genome. But funny enough, it actually utilizes less DNA. It needs less DNA to run. But they weren't able to get a profile through that. Then they ran it through Genealogists, this low SNP DNA type of test, where instead of 700,000 SNPs, it's only testing 10,230 SNPs. So literally just over 1% of the amount of SNPs, the specific spots on the DNA, that than a regular DNA test. And we were able to get a viable profile. We were able to then find cousins of the profile, do the genetic genealogy thing, and get it dwindled down to a specific father and his sons as being the only possible suspects. And then we gave that information to the law enforcement, and they were able to figure it out pretty quickly that it was one of the sons. And interestingly enough, he'd actually passed away just a few years after that, in 1974. He unalived himself. I get, I'm trying, I know I'm on YouTube, so I don't want to go too much into it. One of the worries I have about talking about this work that I used to do. But the thing is that this was only possible because we had intelligence testing. And so I see this as one of the biggest discoveries. Well, I guess I don't know if it's necessarily a discovery, but one of the biggest things that could allow us to amplify artifact testing, because that not only benefits you if you can get your great grandmothers or second great grandmothers, or, think about how far back you could possibly go with it. That could uncover so much for you, but also all of the cousins from those sides where you having that distant ancestor tested, then they're able to find that, oh my gosh, who is this person? They're actually matching me at this interesting amount. And that could help us make tons of discoveries. That, as well as what's known as reconstructed genomes, but I don't know if I'm going to jump into talking about reconstructed genomes right now. So, but hopefully that was an interesting answer to the question. And I was talking for a while, so I'm going to try to jump through some of these chats and see what people are saying. See a lot of talk about 23andMe stuff. When doing genealogy, the best thing to learn is to read old handwriting from 1600. Yeah, well, especially if you're going through those records. It's funny how if you go through enough records from certain time periods, no matter the location, you can often tell when other records are from those same time periods just because of the similarity of the types of paper and the writing styles. Like 1700s records, American, Dutch, Russian, like all these different ones, like to me, every time I see them, they just have this look to them. So yeah. Okay, let's see. Jose Lopez, you made it. You been here. I was right. Yes, it's Alexandra from Koblenz, Germany. Okay, good. Scott Gibbons. My grandma Mary used to joke with family when they did something funny and wrote, call them a Hanyak. If that's how it's spelled, her family was called Black Dutch. Is that the word a Dutch word? I don't know. Hanyak. I don't know. It's not something that I would recognize, but we do have some Dutchies in the chat, so maybe they'll know. Yeah, the problem with that, at one time in Canada, postmasters would put stamps on for you so they could become the DNA version of Milkman. Yeah, and that's definitely a thing that was in the US as well, was that they basically just pay for the stamp and the mailman would put it on there. So yeah, definitely an issue. And then you never know who you might be getting, especially when you might be getting another distant family member but not realizing it. And that's something that I think could be really confusing is, let's say that you think, oh, well, great grandma licked this stamp and put it on there, but really it was great grandpa. So when you get the DNA, you see that they're matching your family, but then you're trying to think, oh, well, this must be the ancestors of great grandma when it's really great grandpa. And, depending on how many matches or how well a certain side is fleshed out, you might be able to figure out really quickly who that actually is. But if like you're the only one in your family who's really tested and the next closest tested cousins are like, third and fourth cousins are really distant, it can be really hard. Yeah. Hi, Brian. Hello. Amiable. Thank you. $2. Well, thank you. I appreciate the super sticker. Yeah, thank you very much. That's awesome. So, Stig, Gothic handwriting is the best. I haven't dealt with a lot of Gothic handwriting, just a bit. Dan Edwards, I've struggled with old Norwegian. Why am I saying this weird? Norwegian records, church record in Latin, Danish, Norwegian, and German all on one page. It's a lot of work. Yeah, I deal with a bunch of languages when going through a lot of the Russian Empire records, especially for like Jewish areas, because they'll have the Russian Cyrillic and then they'll have the Hebrew. That's usually about all they have. Neat Brokema, new function or product I would like to have. Say I match DNA with 10 descendants of a brother of my great grandfather, but the DNA company knows of 10 other descendants that I don't match on their site. I want the DNA company to build a Lazarus profile for that brother of my great grandfather. Is that what you meant with reconstructed genomes? Yes, that's exactly what I mean by reconstructed genomes. For those who don't know, Lazarus is a tool on GEDmatch. GEDmatch Tier 1 membership is required to access this tool, I believe. But basically what it is where, like Neek is saying here, 10 descendants of a brother of his great grandfather, and the company knows of 10 other descendants that he doesn't match, but they're on the website. And basically, the tool allows you to put in all these people that fit certain requirements of matching and not matching you, and uses that to then create a profile of an ancestor, so reconstruct their genome. And this basic the basic idea of it is, let's say you have a second cousin that you match. Well, you know that your second cousin and you share a set of great grandparents. So that means that the DNA that you've inherited must come from your grandparent that's a child of those great grandparents. And so you can, if you're trying to reconstruct your grandparents' genome, well, that's DNA you're sharing with that second cousin. That must be DNA you're getting from that grandfather. So you can say, okay, that DNA is the first part of his reconstructed genome. Then let's say you find another second cousin. So you do the same thing. So you just keep building that and building that. But then you need to also compare other types of profiles if you want to get it really nuanced. And that's kind of where Lazarus comes in. And that's just because of pile-up regions and people being related in multiple distant ways and all that sort of stuff. It's coming to focus here. So yeah. But yes, that is what I mean by reconstructed genome. So the basic idea is that reconstructing the genomes of your ancestors. So with artifact testing that we were discussing before, by testing items from our ancestors that might have their DNA, we're then creating databases of ancestral DNA. And that's going to allow us to make so many amazing connections. And when it comes to all of that as well, I see it where if we could build so many reconstructed genomes of ancestors, could we then start comparing their DNA to each other and reconstructing the genomes of ancestors even further back? I honestly think it's possible. It would take a lot of data and all of that. And I imagine that each generation going back, there's a lot more issues, but I think that that could be truly done. It just might take a while. But I mean, imagine like being able to get DNA, like reconstructing DNA profiles of people that were living in the 1700s without ever having to exhume them. Like just literally just using our DNA of the people alive today to reconstruct those ancestries. And I think we could do it, obviously with margins of error, but I think we could do it. Dragoon 77, are there any projects to automatically scan old handwritten text? From what I can remember, Family Search does it manually. I'd like to play with that, but it seems to be a difficult problem. So yes, in fact, there is a website that is the prominent website. I got to speak with a couple of the people from this company that I believe one guy was like the head guy of it. But this company is, we're going to share the screen. Un momento, por favor. This is Transcribus or Transcribus. I asked them what they preferred in pronunciation, and they're like, we don't mind either way. Kind of like me with Genie Vlogger. Some say Genie Vlogger, some say Genie of Vlogger, some say Jenny Vlogger. I don't care either way. But basically, Transcribus is something you can try for free. Basically, every month they give you 50 credits, and a credit is basically a page, a single page. It gets more complicated depending on what you want to do, but you go in, you select a page that you want to have transcribed, and that's 1 credit. And they have it where you can try out all sorts of things, because first they have it where you can create your own custom models. So, let's say that you have specific, like thousands of a specific type of writing. So here are the custom models. So when you go in, you can even look at their lists of models that other people have used. So there's ones that, so here's an example. So you can see the training set size is 11,693,499 pages, and then it's got an accuracy of 4.3%, and it's focused on 17th to 19th centuries. And so there's all sorts of stuff because it's slightly different when you're talking about Portuguese handwriting versus Dutch handwriting versus English handwriting versus Hebrew, and all in the 17th century. So let's see, field models. So, it's obviously easier when it's printed text, but basically when you get into the handwriting part, which is what I think everybody's really looking for, that's where it comes into play. I'm trying to see if I can find, I think it might be one of those things I have to log in for. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so this is like a list of public AI models, so you can get an idea of like what they're doing. So tons of people doing their own models. You can work with other people to get models going. I mean, you can see there's a ton of them. But this is what you're looking to do, this is where you really need to go. There a lot of places have this type of technology. This is known as OCR, optical character recognition, which interestingly enough is something that's been around since the 19th century. It was originally invented using what was known as the optophone. Optophone. So the optophone was invented, I guess 1913. I guess I need to stop saying 19th century, I guess in the early 1900s, but still, so this is what it was. And basically just read text and made a specific sound when it read a specific letter. And so that's basically what OCR is based off of, except now we're at the point where it's like getting really, really in depth. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff going on with this, and it's free to try out. It's one of those websites where it's probably, if you're going in and you're constantly hitting the paywall, it's probably going to be worthwhile to pay for a membership for you. If you're someone like me where you use it and you rarely hit the paywall, probably fine just using the free credits every month. But if you're trying to train models or work with others to train models, which is what it sounds like you kind of want to do, then you probably are going to end up wanting to, pay for one of the plans or something. So yeah, but this is the website. So Jose Lopez, I thought you had Italian ancestry. I do, but it's through my Dutch ancestry. So basically, if you go up my lines, it goes from, I was born in California, then my mom was born in New York, my grandfather was born in Boston, his father was born in London, his father was also born in London. And actually, that one took a long time to prove, because everything he had said he was born in 1867 in Amsterdam, and there's no way that happened. He was not registered there. And then in going through the GRO records, we finally figured out he was born in London, in Whitechapel, in like 1863. So he always said that he was 4 years younger than he actually was. But yeah, so it went from him to, that was my second great grandfather born in London. Then his father was born in Amsterdam in 1837. And then all of that ancestry was born in Amsterdam all the way back to, I think it's like my seventh or eighth great grandfather, Jacob Nunes Vaz, who was born in Livorno, Italy. And then it's through him that I have that Italian line, but they probably weren't in Italy that long. But yeah, in the Tuscany region. So, a little brother, hello, I love your Jewish areas. Well, thank you very much. Not sure if your username is a shout out to little brother from North Carolina, the hip hop group, but if it is, I grew up listening to those guys. Okay, let's see, where am I at in the chat? Okay, so not too far back. Tori, hello, longtime fan, first time commenting. Is it worth it to test on 23andMe? on 23andMe at this time? Well, hello, Tori. Thank you for commenting. Yes, I do believe that it is worthwhile to test on 23andMe still, most especially if your goal with testing is to find DNA matches and connect with them so that you can expand your biological family tree, whether it be, you're an adoptee, you're having unknown parentage that you're trying to solve, or you're someone like me where you want to just expand your ancestral tree on distant lines and things like that. The reason being that, one, I don't believe 23andMe is going to try to sell their database anytime soon. They filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which means that they're trying to reorganize, and selling their database would basically, it wouldn't make sense, I don't think, if they're trying to reorganize. As well, they've been taking steps that seem to mean they're trying to appeal more to the genealogy community. For the longest time, their focus has been largely on the medical side of things, but in all honesty, they're not making consistent money that way, which is one of the biggest reasons I think they've had issues as a company. Whereas a lot of other DNA testing companies like Ancestry, MyHeritage, Family Tree DNA, they offer more than just the DNA testing. Family Tree DNA does a whole lot on a whole other side than genealogy as well, in terms of their part of Gene by Gene, a company that does a lot of forensic testing and other types of testing outside of the consumer databases, but they also own Family Tree DNA. And then Ancestry and MyHeritage, they have their entire databases of records and like a whole other membership that their DNA tests get people going to. So 23andMe just has had that issue, but lately they've been showing that they're trying to appeal more to the genealogy community. So that's number one, is that, I'm doubt that they're going to sell that database. Two is, even if they do sell the database, it's possible that that database is going to be bought up by another genealogy company. I don't know if that will necessarily happen, but that's a possibility. And then number three is the biggest, in terms of that if you are trying to do DNA testing to find matches, whether it be for unknown parentage, adoptee, whatever, or distant ancestry, you need to be in as many databases as possible, because if that one DNA match that's going to help you uncover whatever you're trying to solve is only in 23andMe, if you do not test in 23andMe, you will not get them as a DNA match, and then you won't be able to solve it. So that's a big piece of the puzzle. And I totally understand if some people feel that the risk of DNA testing with 23andMe worries them too much for the benefit of DNA matches to outweigh that. I totally understand that some people will feel that way and want to delete their DNA from the site. I personally do not feel that way. And I personally feel that if anyone is interested in testing at 23andMe still, that they should do it, especially because there's probably people, 23andMe has been around for so long, there's probably people in that database that literally are only in that database, will never be in other databases because they've since passed away. Or just have no way to access that thing and will never DNA test again for whatever reason. So if you get into 23andMe and then they sell it a month later, at least when you get into 23andMe, basically get all of your info. So that's been something a lot of genealogists have been saying for a long time, as well as 23andMe has gone through its ups and downs, is make sure to capture the information that you get for your DNA matches there. Snow that product. Which is better, FTDNA or MyHeritage? Honestly, it kind of comes down to a couple of different questions. The number one thing I would say is, do you have a budget? If your budget allows you to test on both, then, well, actually, I guess, hold on. I'm jumping ahead myself. In terms of Family Tree DNA or MyHeritage, no matter which one you test with, you can upload to the other. But with Family Tree DNA, you also have the possibility to do Y-DNA testing and mitochondrial DNA testing. And, well, assuming that you're that born gender. But basically, if you have an X and an X chromosome, you're not going to be able to do Y testing. But either way, if you can do Y chromosome testing and mitochondrial DNA testing in Family Tree DNA, and do an autosomal DNA test through MyHeritage, do it. I would personally suggest testing through Ancestry, especially because you can't upload to their database, and you can upload to both FTDNA and MyHeritage. But basically, you want to be in as many databases as possible. But if you're talking about which is better in terms of the admixture percentages, that's not really something that I like to answer, because I don't really see either one being that much better than the other. And as well, if we were to try to get into that, it'd probably depend on what your ancestry is, because each site might be better geared towards whatever your ancestry might be. Like I mentioned earlier in the stream when people were asking or talking about my heritage, was that it seemed that their most recent update was focused on improving the results for people of Northwestern European ancestry. So someone like myself coming from Jewish ancestry, when I got the new MyHeritage results, it was just like no big deal, because it really didn't change much. It like just redefined things, but not in a way that was like sensible to what I know of my family tree. Not that it didn't match necessarily, it just kind of gave me all Jewish results. But it was like so much overlap with it, just didn't make sense. But like it seemed like people with Northwestern European ancestry started to get better breakdowns. There was Dutch, and there was I don't know if there was Belgia, but there were different readings for Northwestern European that they've never had before. And Ancestry did that as well. So, but yeah, I mean, when it comes to DNA matches, though, it's just get into as many databases as possible. All right, let's see. Oh wow, yeah, that's not that far back. Okay, Tori, my sister recently tested on 23andMe, and we'd like our dad to test. We discovered unknown Jewish ancestry, and it looks to come from our dad's side. Complete surprise. Any advice? Well, with 11.5%, that would be the equivalent of a great grandparent that was fully Jewish, meaning one of your dad's grandparents. And all you really need to do at that point is obviously having your dad test will help tell you for sure, because even though it's 11.5% seeming to be a great grandparent, might turn out that you have Jewish ancestry through your mom's side too, and your dad tests and he also gets like 12% Jewish, and then your mom tests and she also gets 12%. A lot of different possibilities with it, but more than likely, when something like this happens, it's usually a great grandparent who is Jewish. So if you look at all of your dad's grandparents, go through the records for each one and see, can you identify one that's connected to Jewish ancestry? Obviously, looking at their own ancestry might help tell you. If you go to my video for Steve Heimler on the main channel, that's exactly what happened with him. So this video right here, he did a reaction to it, which actually, funny enough, this is like my mom's favorite video on YouTube. She loves it because of, I guess, just how much he loved the video. But basically, that's exactly what happened. Was he had like a 12% Jewish ancestry that we found through him doing an ancestry DNA test. So I went through every single one of his great grandparents, and you can see here, like, that's his family tree. And so I went through every single one of those great grandparents, and then I was able to identify which one was Jewish. So if you go watch that video, that might be able to give you an idea of what to kind of look for as well. But yeah, if you get your dad to test and he comes up as like 20% plus Jewish ancestry, then yeah, it's definitely going to be, or like it's probably going to be a grandparent of his. Recently, I started searching family search database regarding Portuguese records. The few that are indexed were indexed by non-Portuguese speakers. All kinds of sometimes funny mistakes. Yeah, that's that's definitely a big issue with indexing in general. Margarita Pacini, what do you think of CRI genetics results? They're a good amount different than Ancestry. I never think about CRI genetics because, I mean, maybe they have matches now, but I only care about DNA testing databases that do DNA matching. The admixture percentages and all that stuff, it's not really useful, or it's not that genealogically useful. It can be, but I find that people will often just confuse themselves more by doing the whole, well, comparing Ancestry to CRI genetics to True Ancestry to MyHeritage to this one to that one, and when it comes down to the admixture percentages, they're just a blurry image of your ancestry. So I always like to think of, if you're looking at a blurry painting, and you're able to pick out that, oh, okay, in this painting, it's really blurry. I can tell that there's an animal here that's a four-legged animal. Maybe it's a dog, maybe it's a cat, maybe it's a goat, maybe it's a horse. Maybe, you know, there's all sorts of possibilities, but we have a general idea that it's a four-legged animal. So in the same sense that we have a really good idea when we look at admixtures about, is it European or African or Asian or things like that, but even then it can get kind of difficult. And then as you get more specific, it gets even more difficult to decipher that. Well, when you do your actual genealogy by looking at your DNA matches, that's when the picture comes into focus. Because instead of just saying, oh, well, they might have been French German, then all of a sudden you do the genealogy and you find out, oh, yeah, my second great grandparent was born in Alsace, Lorraine, and they lived in this little town, and their parents came from this town, and they did this and that. And like, that's literally, you're seeing the records of your ancestors lived here. Because when it comes to DNA and populations and all of that, especially understanding these DNA tests, all they're really doing is looking at your DNA and then looking at the modern populations and saying how much similar is your DNA to them. So if you get a reading of French German, then that's just telling you that the population they've defined as French German is modern day people that have tested, and your DNA, this percentage of it correlates to what we've found that's common amongst them. So that's, yeah. So I don't know if that answered the question that well, but basically, yeah, I don't really think about CRI genetics much. If someone knows if they've started doing DNA matching, let me know. But as far as I know, I don't think they have. And even then, their database, I doubt their database would be that useful because any databases starting up now have a lot to catch up to for like the big databases like Ancestry and 23andMe and MyHeritage and all of them. Okay, let's see. How far back am I? Okay. Okay, let's see. Mark Van Alstein. I match with a small group of people that have Sephardic ancestry. Do you have the ability to trace unknown ancestry? I mean, yeah. If you're asking, I mean, in the general sense of, well, I guess in the general sense of like, do you or does anyone have the ability? Yes. Do I have the ability as well? Yes. But basically, yeah. I mean, if you have a small group of people that have Sephardic ancestry, the number one thing to look at first is how much Sephardic ancestry do they have? If you're dealing with people, especially a lot of people where it's like a lot of Sephardic ancestry, especially like 100%, that's a big, big hit. If it's small amounts, then it could also just be it could just be a commonality with a certain population group. So with a name like Van Alstein, I don't know if you're Dutch or Belgian or, something around the Low Countries sorts of areas, but I would imagine that if you have that, it's not uncommon that as you build out family trees distantly, you'll find some connection to Jews, just because there have been so many Jews in the Netherlands, especially for, hundreds upon hundreds of years, basically going back to the late 1500s, but especially the early 1600s. And while it wasn't a super common thing, if you look at, all of your family tree and like tracing up and then back down and all the people they married, it wouldn't be surprising to find out that you had, a third or fourth cousin, at least one of your probably many hundreds, if not thousands of cousins at that distance that married someone who is Jewish. And then you have all these matches descending from that specific cousin who then you see, oh, well, they have Jewish. So there's a possibility that it might be something like that, but there's also that possibility that it may be something more specific. Yeah, so yeah, it certainly could be a good hint, but there's a lot more that you want to do to take that further. Okay. So yeah, sometimes I miss questions. That's why I say the thing, I only guarantee answer if you do the super sticker. Sometimes I end up missing stuff, so it happens. Canadian Spring, have you tried mapping your ancestors using Google Earth? I've just started doing all my British ancestors. I have not done that, but I know that there are a lot of people who do things like that. There's a lot of genealogy programs that have a tool like that where you can basically go through and map out where your ancestors lived, or genie.com has a what do you call it, a tool where you can look at the statistics of your family tree and see like where the most common different places and all that. And I'm trying to remember if they have a tool kind of like what you're saying, but yeah, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but doing it with Google Earth is kind of a cool idea. All right, well, I know multiple people below 40 that have birth dates that don't match their ID, so I wouldn't trust official records too much. I mean, every record you need to understand context. Context changes how you interpret records, and certain records we have more confidence in, other records not as much confidence, and there's always nuance to everything. Whether it's, what's the possibility of people lying, the possibility of people getting things wrong, and just all of that variation. So I mean, I think it depends on the record. Eric Sheridan, a lot of people have opted to have their information deleted from 23andMe, so the data set is smaller than it used to be. Yeah, there's also a big question about the numbers that 23andMe puts out in terms of their database size, because they always talk about, I think it's like a 12.5 million database, but they don't include in that, does that include all of the people that have opted into DNA matching? Or like only the people that have opted into DNA matching, or is that everyone that's ever tested on their database? Because a lot of people that have tested never opted their DNA for DNA matching. In fact, there's like a whole big group of people that don't even realize that they'd have to do that for it to happen, because you have to go in and give it consent. And I think they've changed how they do the consent over the years. So yeah, it really varies. But it really could vary in how big that database is. But yeah, there's also that question of how many people have deleted from it. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing with what's going on right now with 23andMe, is that it is causing a ton of people to delete really quickly. And I hope that not too many people regret that, especially people that are trying to find family and stuff like that. Because once you delete it, it's deleted permanently, and you got to pay to test again, which for some might not be a big deal, but could be for others. So, how we got here, genealogy, yeah, Northwestern Europe, much better than before. Yeah. All right. I don't know if you're trying to be political about this or what, but I guess I can answer. Do you have comments about the genealogy of Jews in the Middle East? Well, yeah, there's a lot of records on Jews in the Middle East. There's records that we have from Amsterdam. I did an entire video about how the Jewish community of Amsterdam collected tons of money to send to the Jews living in Eretz Israel, in Jerusalem, and in Hebron, and Tibet, and not Tibet. What is it? I can't remember. But I did a whole video talking about those records. But yeah, I mean, there's been there's been centuries of history there, and a lot of genealogy, especially throughout that entire area. So yeah. All right. My cousin just wrote to say he wants to locate his father's half Japanese children who remained in Japan. Any ideas on how to proceed in Japan? That's an interesting one. I don't have any personal experience with it. There are Asian-based DNA tests. I don't know. I think one of them is based in Japan, I believe. I can't remember which one. Let's see. Is it? No, 23 Mofeng is China. I think Weijin is China too. But basically the idea being that with Asian-based DNA tests, you have a higher likelihood of testers from Asia, whereas you do Ancestry DNA or you do 23andMe or something like that, it's not as likely that you're going to get people who are living in Japan testing, which is what you'd want. So that would be one of the things, is to see if that's a possibility. I don't know how easily accessible Japanese records are and all that. Like I really have very little experience when it comes to East Asian genealogies and stuff. So it's, it's a difficult thing. But one of the things that you could also look into, we'll just pull it up to see, is the Family Search Wiki. Japan genealogy. So, yeah. So, I mean, it looks like, a lot of these are dead links, linking to something where there's nothing there. But there's some stuff. So, you might be able to, depending on, what you know. But yeah, that's one of the things I did, just reading up and learning as much as you can. I'm just noticing the time, so I don't think we're going to go that much longer. Saba, do you still play games on your gaming channel? I found an interesting video game about genealogy researching a fictional family tree. So I haven't done that in a while. I think about it every once in a while, but it just kind of became annoying. Like when I'd want to play video games, I kind of wanted to relax. And at first I thought, oh, well, it's just playing video games. I'll do that streaming. And then it was like kind of a whole deal. Like, even though not a lot of people were in the streams, it's just like, it's a whole different, it's not as, you don't get to relax really the same way. So I just kind of like haven't done it in a while. I might do it again. But I know what you're talking about, the fictional family tree game. I had a couple of people recommend it to me. And I think I saw some gameplay of it. I think Daniel Loftus did some gameplay of it on his channel or one of his content places. So, yeah. Little brother, my great-grandpa was Austrian, but apparently lived in Berlin. My family always told me we have connections to the Jews, but my DNA test said we are Austrian through and through. Yeah, that can happen. The thing with having Jewish ancestry as well that you might not know about is, depending on how far back it may be, you may not inherit any of that DNA. So if you have siblings or if your parents decide to do a DNA test, even though you didn't get any of that reading, it might come up for them. Obviously, the lack of it not coming up doesn't mean that it is going to show up for them either. But, if that story is true, like your great-grandpa, all right, yeah. So if it's like, I guess one way to think about it that makes it really easy, you have 128 fifth great-grandparents, okay? So, 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 second great-grandparents, 32 third great-grandparents, 64 fourth great-grandparents, 128 fifth great-grandparents. Now, if you got a perfect amount of DNA from every single one of your fifth great-grandparents, that would be just under 1% DNA. So if you have a Jewish ancestor at the fifth great-grandparent level and you were able to get the perfect, split out, 1 out of 128 of that DNA, it'd be less than 1%. But then you also have to remember, with recombination, it's random. So we don't get a perfect amount of DNA from our ancestors. Like looking at grandparents, it's very often you'll have one grandparent, grandpa, you got 22% DNA, and grandma, you got 28%, or, whatever. So as you go further back, it becomes more likely as you get to fourth great-grandparents and fifth great-grandparents that you have an ancestor that you just didn't inherit any DNA from, but they are your ancestor. So if you're about my age, I'm in my 30s, then a fifth great-grandparent is usually living about in the 1700s. So, could be as early as like the early 1700s, could be as late as the late 1700s, but usually that's about where they're living. Sometimes it varies, obviously, but that's assuming you're about my age. If you're younger, it could be a little closer in time. If you're older, it could be further back in time. So with a great-grandpa, most great-grandparents for people about my age, assuming you're my age, that's going to be someone born in the late 1800s or early 1900s. So let's say maybe 1880 to 1920 would be a common sort of age range there, sort of. So with that, then, if that was his grandpa or great-grandpa, then we are getting back to, your great-grandfather's grandfather. Well, that's going to be your third great grandfather and your fourth great, so that's a possibility too. So it's just I don't know, just thinking of all the considerations with it. So I wouldn't rule it out as oh, you definitely don't have Jewish ancestry, but just you got to see what happens further. Canadian Spring, I'm using Google Earth so it's shareable with family eventually. That's a good idea. It's a good point. All right. Let's jump ahead a bit because I see that we're I see that. Mark, Mr. Ross, just wondering how I can contact you directly. Thank you. Well, in terms of me doing genealogy work, this probably is a good point to say. I don't really take on genealogy projects, but I do consultations. So one-on-one consultations, basically we set up a time to meet on Zoom, and I sit down with you on Zoom and we go through stuff for about an hour and help you out. So this is especially helpful for people that really like doing their own genealogy work, but maybe they feel like if they had, some mentorship for an hour, in a sense, that could help push them past it. So if you'd like to get in touch with me to do that, you can always email me at genieVlogger@gmail.com. So, the way I spell it up there, about, up there, just at genieVlogger.com. And, we can set that up. If you are looking for someone to take on a full project, you can email me about that. Try to keep your emails brief. I know I get some people that'll email me and it's like 20 paragraphs long, and it's like, I get so many emails a day, I can barely read all of those, let alone the long ones. So try to keep it brief. But message me that way. People can also set those up through my Patreon. So if you go to patreon.com/genieVlogger, then you can go and there's a couple of tiers where you can get that. I think I have it where one's a half-hour tier and the other is a 45-minute tier. So if you want an hour-long consultation, you'll have to email me for that. But for the Patreon ones, you do get like a little bit more stuff with it as well. But yeah, so if people are interested in hiring me in some way, best way to contact me is by email. But I am looking to take on more people for consultation. So like one-on-one consultations, that's definitely the main thing I'm looking to do. Retro Rob Casa, good morning. Yeah, I know I'm late to the party. Yeah, you're real late this time, Rob. Probably going to end it soon in the next 5-10 minutes. Oh, wow. I need to do this. I forgot to, I didn't get my watch charging and I completely forgot to do that. Whoops-a-daisy. Karma, my great-great-grandfather, John Adamson, lied about his age to sign up for the Civil War in Michigan. He was 14 and said that he was 18. Yeah, that was a common one. Have a good day. Heading off to my stream now. Well, enjoy your stream. Have a good one, Brian. All right, let's see. King Lee, should we delete our 23andMe? I personally don't think so. I think you should wait. Obviously research and learn about what's going on. But in my opinion, the way that the company is trying to reorganize through Chapter 11 bankruptcy is something where they're probably not going to be selling their database. And even if they do sell their database, I personally don't see any serious risks from it. And the risks that are there, I think, are very minimal and largely protected as well through laws that are available throughout the world. In the US, we have the GINA laws, GINA. In Canada, they have the genetic non-discriminate GNDA. Yeah, genetic. Yeah, because in the US it's GINA. In Canada it's GNDA. In Europe they have the GDPR laws. So yeah, there's all that sort of stuff. Okay. Somebody's speaking something different. I have no idea what you're saying there. Something about my heritage, obviously, and Malaysia. Let's see. The result only showed for. Okay, yeah, I guess your first comment was in another language. This one's in something else. but the result only showed 48% South Asian and 5% Punjabi. My European side was much more detailed. Is it harder to estimate ethnicity if you are mixed? So assuming what your question is, which I believe is that, I believe that you're basically asking, is it harder to estimate ethnicity if you're mixed, but specifically your European side was more detailed. So why is your Asian side not as detailed? And basically what it comes down to is just that like companies like MyHeritage aren't able to have more nuanced results for certain population groups because they just don't have a robust enough data set. So for a lot of Asian groups, they're able to tell them on a more continental or large regional sort of estimation. But in terms of very specific and nuanced, they aren't able to. And that's one reason why I will suggest for people with Asian ancestry to look into Asian-based DNA tests, because a lot of those will have much more nuanced breakdowns for Asian results. Rob, still waiting for a Jew to appear in my family tree in Amsterdam. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see if there's some connection between our families, even if not necessarily like a blood connection. But if there's so many notarial records in Amsterdam, I imagine we can find something where some relative of mine was doing business with some relative of yours. So, but one thing that I enjoyed a lot about genealogy, and especially when I connect with my cousins and people connected to my family tree, is that you quickly find that it really is a small world, because you'll find all these other connections with them, either in present day or with other ancestral lines or what have you. Okay, let's see. Okay. I did a DNA test of MyHeritage. I'm half Swedish with origins from Malaysia. I don't know exactly what my biological father's ancestry is. He looks more Indian and I look more Southeast Asian. Yeah, so if that's the case, definitely looking at Asian-based DNA tests like 23MoFong and WeGene, although I think those are Chinese-based, but there's other ones beyond those. And especially those that do DNA matching, because there's probably going to be more people in Asia that are in their DNA databases, and hopefully from wherever your father's ancestry, your biological father's ancestry is from, which would help tell you. Well, I think with that, I'm going to end the stream here. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. Very appreciative to Amiable for the super chat today, the $2. Thank you very much. Hopefully going to have some new videos coming out. The next Max Miller one will be, or the next YouTube family trees episode will be on Max Miller's family again. This one is taking so much research, just a lot of little things to like confirm and stuff, but very, very interesting, I think. So I'm looking forward to it. Not sure when it'll come out, but that'll be coming out. The best DNA test video for 2025, that'll be coming out. And then, hopefully lots of stuff I've got in the works that I really shouldn't even be talking about because it's in the works. So thank you, everybody. You all have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and I will see you next week on the main channel stream. I'm Jarrett Rossi, Genie Vlogger.